She thought she would walk out of that office with my father's house in her purse. Instead, she walked out with a perjury warning, a frozen account, and a notary seal that turned to dust in her hands. The stamp she pinned everything on had expired 2 years before my father died, and that tiny date ended her story. If you clicked because the title promised that my stepmother tried to take a $770,000 inheritance with a forged transfer, and I turned it around at the will reading, you are in the right place. This is the full story of how a trust binder, a notary commission date, and a quiet plan brought justice into a room that was not designed for me. I am 36, an Ohio girl who edits videos at night and fixes coffee in the morning. My channel is called After Her Lies because it turns out a lot of women like me need to hear how other women get through the things they were never warned about. The lies in this story belong to Olivia, my father's second wife. She married my dad when I was 18, right before I left Cincinnati for college. My dad, Kent, was an accountant who wore the same watch for 25 years and color-coded his file folders. He died on October 12, 2024, at 66. What was at stake felt like everything he had ever touched. A brick house on Observatory Avenue that he bought in 2009, a brokerage account worth roughly $410,000 on the day he died, savings at a credit union, and a stack of policies and designations that added up to about $770,000. There was a will signed in 2019, a revocable living trust with a pour-over clause, and tucked inside a safe deposit box he had left a letter about those documents. The problem was that Olivia said she had a transfer on death affidavit for the house and new beneficiary forms for the accounts. The even bigger problem was that she tried to wave those papers like they were the end of the conversation. The first time I realized this would not be polite was 3 days after the funeral. We met at the bank's trust office downtown. The room smelled like old carpet and hand sanitizer. A trust officer named Mr. Bloom slid a folder across the table. Olivia sat next to him as if she had always belonged there. Her lipstick did not move when she said the words that made my jaw lock. She claimed that Dad signed a transfer on death affidavit for the house in August of 2024, naming her as the sole beneficiary upon his death. She claimed the brokerage account at Lakeview had a last-minute change of beneficiary made on October 7th. She said I would not need to worry about probate because there would be nothing left to probate. She had a copy of a deed with a notary stamp at the bottom and a TOD form for the account with a signature that looked like Dad's if you squinted from across the room. I felt small for a second. Then I thought of Dad labeling envelopes with the neat pencil lines only he could draw. I asked Mr. Bloom whether they had reviewed the will and the trust. He said we would get to that at the will reading with the notary on Friday. That gave me 4 days. 4 days to either accept what Olivia was saying or to do what my channel has taught me to do, which was look for the thing that does not match the rest of the picture. The pressure started immediately. On Wednesday morning, Olivia called my Aunt Denise and told her I was making trouble. She told my half-brother Jacob that if I dragged this out, he would not get anything. She posted a photo from the funeral where I looked tired and wrote, "Some people grieve by counting, some by plotting." That one stung. At the grocery store, a family friend tilted her head and asked if I was really going to fight a widow. Online, a stranger told me to remember the biblical daughters who stayed quiet. In the language of humiliation, subtle words do the same damage as public ones. And then there were the practical obstacles. When I tried to get information from the credit union, they told me the accounts were privacy protected. When I asked Lakeview about the beneficiary change, they said any documents would be disclosed at the will reading or by court order. A probate clerk said if assets passed by beneficiary designation, the court might never see them. Meanwhile, Olivia's lawyer, a silver-haired man named Hal, sent a letter warning about a no-contest clause in the will. He wanted me to know that if I challenged and lost, I could forfeit my share entirely. I went home to the condo I rent in Oakley and put every piece of paper I had on the table. Somewhere in the mess, there had to be a seam I could pull. I kept hearing Dad's voice, serious and kind. He had told me once that a system works until it meets a fact. The first fact I found sat in my inbox. In 2019, when Dad set up his revocable living trust, he emailed me a PDF to review because he said he liked how I caught typos. I had saved it and then forgotten it. The header on that trust showed the trustee as Kent during his life and then as me after his death, with a provision that the house would pour into the trust for a sale and split. The will, signed the same day, directed all property to the trust. The trust granted Olivia a right to live in the house for 12 months if she needed it, but it did not give her the house. That was the first seam. The second fact was the way the notary stamp looked on the transfer on death affidavit Olivia had waived. It was on a copy, not an original, and the seal looked darker than the signature line. I am not a forensic examiner, but I am a person who spends a lot of time zooming in on details during edits. I zoomed the photo I had snapped when Mr. Bloom briefly slid the affidavit out of the folder. The notary's name was clear. The commission number was clear. The expiration date looked like March 31st, 2022. Dad died on October 12th, 2024. The affidavit purported to be signed on August 23rd, 2024. My stomach jolted. If a notary commission has expired, they cannot notarize a document. An invalid notarization does not necessarily make a document void in every context, but for a transfer on death affidavit, the statute requires a proper acknowledgement. I wrote down the name and number and called the Ohio Secretary of State's Notary Division. The recording sent me to a database where I could search commissions. I typed the name and there it was. Commissioned to March 31st, 2022. No renewal listed. If I had been wrong, I could have apologized and accepted whatever Dad had intended. But if I was right, we were not fighting over feelings. We were fighting over validity. I called a lawyer named Priya, who had helped a friend with a guardianship last year. She took my call even though her day was full. "We do not promise outcomes," she said. "We promise work." I wired a retainer of $12,500 because my father taught me that professionals cost money and value is not an accident. Priya sent me to a forensic document examiner, a woman named Vera, who charged $1,850 for a preliminary review of signatures and stamps. She asked me for every sample of Dad's signature from the last 5 years and for any clear image of the stamp. On Thursday morning, Vera called me back. She said she could not give me a final conclusion without the original, but the signature on the TOD affidavit showed signs of trace overlap, which can appear when someone is copying an old signature onto a new line. The seal impression looked like a scan that had been copied and rescaled, and the date layout on the stamp was in a font that brand of stamp discontinued in 2021. She was careful. She never said forged. She said inconsistent. Meanwhile, Priya prepared an emergency motion for the probate court to issue a temporary restraining order to freeze the transfer of any real estate or brokerage assets, pending the will reading and a hearing. She drafted a notice of caveat and a lis pendens for the house in Hyde Park. She explained that Ohio calls the paper that authorizes an executor letters of authority, and that the court would not issue any Until the judge was satisfied we had clarity. She also explained that beneficiary designations can override a will, but cannot be altered by a power of attorney after death. That last part was important because when I asked for logs from Lakeview, an internal email showed that on October 7th, 5 days before Dad died, a form was submitted from a fax number I recognized as Olivia's home office line. The cover sheet listed the capacity as agent under power of attorney. My father was in the hospital on October 7th, on oxygen and sedated. A power of attorney ends at death. It does not end before death, but it cannot be used to change beneficiary designations in some institutions when the principal no longer has capacity without specific authority. The narrowness mattered. The bank would not admit it, but Priya knew a subpoena would. By Thursday night, the plan took shape. We would go to the will reading on Friday at 10 with the notary present. We would listen first. We would not interrupt. When Olivia waived the affidavit again, Priya would ask the notary to produce a commission card. If it was expired at the time of the acknowledgement, we would ask the trust officer to put that in writing. Then we would ask to see the Lakeview beneficiary change file. If the bank refused, we would walk from the trust office to the courthouse and file the emergency motion already printed in my bag. I thought I had everything. I had proof that Dad intended a trust. I had a copy of the trust. I had Vera's preliminary letter. I had the notary database printout. I had the courage to sit in a room where a person I had known for 18 years would call me a liar. And then my browser flashed, and I found the last fact I did not know I needed. In Dad's old email account, in the archived folder, was a draft message from July 29th, 2019, the day he signed his trust documents. It was addressed to me and to a folder he had labelled House. It read, in his square sentences, I am leaving you duplicate originals of the trust in the safe deposit box at Fifth Third, and a letter for Olivia explaining the 12-month occupancy. If Olivia lies, open the envelope with the red tab, because it has the instruction my attorney insisted on to protect you from a last-minute change. I stared at the words. I did not know what that meant. I did not know where the safe deposit box key was. I did know the box number. My Aunt Denise did too. Fifth Third's vault was 6 blocks from the will reading. I looked at the clock. I had 12 hours before we had to be at the trust office, and I did not have bank hours on my side, but I had something else. I had a voicemail in my phone from 2 years earlier where Dad reminded me to always check the bottom of the drawer with the screwdrivers for the thing we might someday need. I lifted that drawer in his old tool chest. The key slid like a coin into my palm. I called the vault and asked if I could access the box as his daughter with identification and the death certificate, which I had. The clerk said yes. I slept for 3 hours, woke at 6, and walked in when their metal blinds rattled up at 8. The letter with the red tab was waiting exactly where he said it would be. I did not open it. I put it in my bag, over my heart, and headed for the will reading. And then I saw the clause nobody expected. The trust office conference room had a long table and a glass wall. You could see the elevator doors open and close behind me. Mr. Bloom greeted us with the practiced calm of a man who sees families bring their weather inside. A notary named Teresa sat at the end of the table with a small leather case. Hal the lawyer wore the sort of tie that says he has been doing this since before I was born. Olivia wore black and pearls and pity. My Aunt Denise took a seat on my left. Priya opened her notebook and wrote the case number on the top of a fresh page. There is something holy about numbers. They anchor you when people try to move the room. Mr. Bloom started with the will. He read the formal language that made my father sound like a line of letters. Kent Ellison, of sound mind and memory, revokes all prior wills and codicils. The will poured everything into the revocable trust. Then he slid the trust binder across the table. Olivia looked surprised and then recovered. She told the room there had been a transfer on death affidavit recorded for the house, and the house had never gone into the trust. She pulled out her copy of the affidavit with the notary stamp at the bottom. Teresa, the notary, leaned forward slightly. Priya did not say a word. She looked at the stamp and wrote down the commission expiration date visible in the image. Then she looked at Teresa. "Do you have your commission card with you?" Priya asked in a voice so even it made the room quieter. Teresa nodded and produced a small plastic card. Priya asked Mr. Bloom to read the expiration date on the commission in the image, and then to read the expiration date on the card. Mr. Bloom read March 31st, 2022 in the image, and December 31st, 2026 on the card. Teresa cleared her throat and said she did not notarize the document shown. She said that was not her stamp. Teresa said she had never met my father. Olivia's hands went still. Hal shifted in his chair. He said we were all making too much out of a copy. He said the original had been recorded with the county, and we could request a certified copy from the recorder's office. Priya nodded and said she already had. A clerk had emailed her a scan at 9:30 that morning because Priya had filed an open records request the moment we walked into the building. She slid the county's PDF across the table. The stamp in that image was the same. The commission expiration was still March 31st, 2022. The page came with a recorder's timestamp showing it had been recorded the week after Dad died. It is legal to record a transfer on death affidavit after death, but the document must still have been properly executed before death. The question of timing had not even begun, and the question of validity was already in front of us. Olivia tried a different direction. She said even if the house did not pass by that paper, the brokerage account did, because the beneficiary designation had been changed on October 7th, and a notarization was not required for that form. Mr. Bloom said that was a matter for Lakeview. He turned to me and asked if I had anything to add before they moved on. My chest beat fast enough to make me dizzy. I thought of the red tab in my bag. Then I thought of Dad's line about facts. I said very simply that any beneficiary change made by power of attorney would need to show specific authority and capacity. I said my father was not able to sign anything on the 7th, and that I would be requesting the hospital's chart to confirm his status. Priya added that any attempt to change beneficiaries using a power of attorney from the principal's hospital room raised questions of undue influence and capacity under standard banking practices. She asked Mr. Bloom to note that and to schedule a joint call with Lakeview's counsel. Hal called me dramatic. He said I was trying to undo my father's wishes. He said that I was a YouTuber with an audience and that I would love to make a scene. It is funny how people diminish the things they do not understand. After her lies is a real job. I do not humiliate people. I describe patterns so other women can see them coming. I was calm. I told him my father's wishes were in the trust in front of him, written in 2019 when nobody was in a hospital bed. Then I reached into my bag and set the sealed envelope with the red tab on the table. I told the room that the safe deposit box held 2 duplicate originals of the trust and this letter, which my father left for Olivia in case there was confusion. I asked Teresa to watch the opening so nobody would question chain of custody. Teresa pulled on white cotton gloves, slit the envelope, and slid out a single sheet initialed by my father and 2 witnesses. The sentence that mattered was highlighted in yellow by my father himself. It read that any transfer on death instrument or beneficiary change executed in the last 6 months of his life that did not include a written attestation by his attorney of record would not reflect his wishes and should be reconsidered in light of the trust's distribution terms. It was not a magic spell. It was a signal to anyone who cared about his intent. It was also a heads-up that his attorney, the one who drafted the trust, had likely refused to sign off on last-minute changes. Priya smiled for the first time all morning. Olivia said it was unfair. She said Dad had promised her the house. She said he had told her after the 4th of July that he wanted her to be safe. I do not know what my father said on a porch in July. I know what he signed in a lawyer's office in 2019, and I know he printed a letter and hid it under metal for me to find. Priya asked Teresa to notarize our signatures on an acknowledgement of receipt of the letter for the record. Teresa did, her valid commission shining like a small lighthouse at the bottom of the page. We walked from the trust office straight to the courthouse. Priya filed the emergency motion with the clerk. The judge assigned to the estate, a woman with clear glasses and a hair clip that had more work to do than a hair clip should, set a hearing for Monday at 9. We served Olivia with the motion in the hallway. Hal read it and frowned so hard it looked like a photograph of a frown. The court issued a temporary order preventing any sale or transfer of the house and freezing the Lakeview account pending the hearing. In a town where bad things happen behind closed doors, we had pried one open. The courthouse clock read 1:12. I ate a granola bar and watched my hands shake. There was still the hearing. There was still the possibility that a judge would tell me I was wrong, but there was also the fact hanging in the air like the scent of rain. On Monday, the record would become public, and I still had one thing left I had not used. The notary whose name was stamped at the bottom of the fake affidavit owned a nail salon in Norwood. On her Instagram, she had posted a video on the afternoon of August 23rd, 2024, the exact date on the affidavit. In the video, she sang along to a song while holding a margarita on a beach in Florida. Her friend tagged the bar and wished her a happy 40th. If Teresa had not notarized the TOD and the person whose name appeared on the stamp had been in another state, someone had copied a notary seal. Someone had filled a void with ink. I sent Priya the video. She wrote back one line, "Save it to 3 places," and then I saw the clause nobody expected. Probate court is not television, but Monday morning felt cinematic. The courtroom had wood benches and soft light through high windows. A court reporter sat ready. The judge asked us to state our names. I said mine, and my voice did not waver. Hal tried to strike the emergency order as unnecessary and punitive. The judge asked him to stop using adjectives and tell her about the transfer on death affidavit. Priya stood and handed the judge a printed page showing the notary commission expiration of March 31st, 2022. She handed up the recorded affidavit bearing the same expired stamp. She handed up the notary's vacation post and an affidavit from the notary herself, whom Priya had reached by phone on Friday afternoon after we left court. The notary swore that she did not notarize any document for Kent and that the stamp image was not hers. The judge's jaw moved once, a small motion, like she was moving a puzzle piece into place. Next, Priya called Mr. Bloom as a witness. He testified about the will and trust from 2019. He testified that the trust granted Olivia a right to occupy the house for up to 12 months after death, provided she paid utilities and routine maintenance, after which the trustee would sell and distribute the proceeds equally between me and Jacob, my half-brother. He testified that the will poured all probate assets into the trust. The judge asked whether the house was titled solely in my father's name at death. Mr. Bloom said yes. The judge asked whether any valid transfer on death instrument had been recorded before death. Mr. Bloom said the only document on file was the one recorded after death bearing the expired stamp. The judge nodded. Then came Lakeview. Their attorney brought a file in a dark folder. The bank had resisted all week, but a subpoena arrives with the weight of the state behind it. Inside the folder was the beneficiary change form dated October 7th. The signature line read, Kent Ellison, but the box checked on the first page said, Agent under durable power of attorney. The attachment that would have granted specific authority to change beneficiary designations under that power was missing. The bank's internal notes showed a fax header of Olivia's home line and a call log where a representative recorded that the principal was hospitalized. There was also a red flag note generated by their compliance software that the attorney of record for the trust had called twice in late August to ask that any changes be routed through his office. The bank had ignored that note. The judge asked the bank's lawyer to explain their policy. He shifted and said the form should not have been processed without specific authority, and that in any event, the power of attorney would not have applied if the principal lacked capacity. The judge looked at Hal and asked if he wished to speak. Hal said that my father's intent mattered more than imperfect paperwork. He said Dad wanted Olivia safe. The judge said intent is read through the instruments the decedent signed when capacity and form are present, and not through hindsight and sorrow. She said the trust showed intent, and the last-minute documents showed either confusion or opportunism. She did not need to choose which to find their effect. She then did what the law does when it is asked clearly. She found that the transfer on death affidavit recorded after death bore an invalid acknowledgement and lacked a valid notary seal at the time of purported execution. She declared it void. She found that the beneficiary change form submitted on October 7th was defective for lack of specific authority and capacity documentation, and that the bank would revert to the prior designation, which was the trust. She appointed me as successor trustee under the trust and denied Olivia's application to serve as executor of the probate estate due to a conflict of interest. She ordered Lakeview to freeze the account pending retitling to the trust and ordered a preliminary accounting within 30 days. She imposed a temporary restraining order preventing Olivia from encumbering the house. She set a status in 60 days to confirm sale preparations and occupancy arrangements under the trust's 12-month clause. She referred the notarization to the prosecutor for review. Olivia stared at the table. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt the weight move from my chest to my hands. That is the strange thing about justice. It does not float. It sits. It takes up space. There were consequences that day and after. The prosecutor opened an investigation into the use of a counterfeit notary stamp. I do not know what will happen with that yet, and I am not the one pressing it. The bank refunded 2 wire transfer fees that had been charged when the beneficiary change went through and then had to be reversed. The court ordered Olivia to pay 3/4 of my attorney's fees on the motion, $34,200, after finding that her actions multiplied the proceedings unjustifiably. The house stayed in her possession for the 12 months my father allowed. We put in writing the rules of that occupancy. She pays utilities, ordinary maintenance, and keeps it insured. I kept the tone as human as possible. I sent over a list of repair people Dad used. I told her I would not come inside without notice. In return, she agreed that a broker could photograph the home at month 10 and show it at month 12. It is not a win that feels like a parade. It is a win that feels like a contract. Jacob and I met at the house in May to sort the garage. He is 19 and still learning how not to move like he might break something. He apologized for believing Olivia without asking me. I told him the truth is a thing you practice, and all of us are beginners when we are grieving. We found Dad's old baseball glove from 1988 and a stapled packet where he had calculated compound interest for us with a pencil at different rates over 10 years. Numbers again as love. I kept a close ledger of the trust. I filed the inventory with the court. I engaged a broker and got a comparative market analysis that showed a list price of $495,000. When we accepted an offer of $481,000 in August of 2025, I felt like Dad had shut a drawer softly. After paying commissions and closing costs and the trust's legal fees, the net was $357,000. Split in two, that meant $178,500 to me and the same to Jacob. The Lakeview account, once retitled to the trust, had edged up to $415,000 by the time it distributed. After taxes on some gains and the allocation to a small bequest Dad had made to his church, we each received another $192,000. I paid off the remainder of my student loans that same week, $46,000 still sitting there like a ghost. And when I hit confirm, I cried. It was not the money. It was the ending of a chapter that should not have had a plot twist. There are costs beyond dollars. Olivia and I do not speak unless we have to. She sent me a message in July saying she had found a sweater of mine in the back of a closet, and did I want it? I told her to donate it. I wrote a letter that I will not send, telling her the small ways she could have been my friend. I do not need her to be my enemy. I need her to stop being a bad actor in rooms where the quiet women have to sit. I know some of you will ask whether this could happen to you. The answer is more than you want to hear. Beneficiary designations are powerful. Transfer on death deeds are efficient. Both can be abused by people who get to paperwork before grief does. The way you defend yourself is not with rage, but with preparation. Put your intent where a judge can find it. Use a trust if your state allows it. Name a backup trustee who is not the person who will benefit most. Include a clause instructing institutions to route changes through counsel in the last months of life. Lock down your notaries. Keep your documents in a place that does not depend on a single key in the same house where the person who might misuse them sleeps. Tell your children where the drawer is with the screwdriver that lifts. I went back to the trust office one last time to sign the closing statement when the house sale funded. Teresa was there again, stamping documents, her real commission steady on the page. She asked about after her lies. She said her sister watches. I told her the channel exists because a lot of us are asked to keep secrets that do not serve us. She nodded and asked if it was hard to tell the story while it was still happening. I told her it is easier to do the hard thing when you are holding something that belongs to the truth. For me this time, it was a notary date and a line in a trust. For someone else, it will be a text message or a board minute or a cashier's receipt. The specifics change, the pattern does not. The last email from Hal arrived a week after the sale. He said Olivia did not plan to contest the distributions. He said she would be moving to a smaller place in Norwood and hoped the court would not refer the notarization matter any further. Priya wrote back one sentence. We will continue to cooperate with any inquiry. That was it. No victory laps, no sugar on top. Just the sound of a file drawer closing and a life moving forward. If you stayed to the end, you know what I know. Justice is not a feeling. It is a chain of small, specific things that hold when someone tries to pull you apart. My father gave me those things: a commission date, a trust, 12 months of grace for a woman he had loved. He believed numbers were a kind of kindness. He was right. I honor him by doing the math out loud, on camera, for anyone who needs to hear it. 96% of you who watch are not subscribed. If this helped you, subscribe to After Her Lies. Tap like so this reaches someone who needs it next. And tell me in the comments what clause you never expected until the day you needed it.